just wait for the thumbs up from Megan to let me know it's live.
Okay.
And all right, we are live. Welcome to another Breach Report. We're excited to be kicking it off and talking to Mr. Robert Thomas. And Robert, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and your company.
My name is Robert Thomas. I own a pure play cybersecurity consulting company, 180A Consulting, and I own a software development company, primarily developing products and maturing products, focusing on the three-letter agency, Forrest in Washington, D.C. So I've been in the cybersecurity business for quite a while, working directly for the U.S. government. The National Security Agency and the Department of Defense, went into the private sector in 1999, went back to the government service during the 9/11 time, and then spent 3 years there, came back to the private sector. So I'm there full time now. Very gracious of you to invite me on the show. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. And as always, any live listeners, please go ahead, put questions into the chat as we're going on any topics that you might have further questions on or be interested in. And of course, I know that Robert or myself would always be happy to answer questions after the show as well. So, Robert, 1990, did you say 1999 is when you made that cutover?
Yeah, I retired in 1999 from military, Department of Defense. I was an intelligence officer, primarily working outside of the United States and a bunch of little third world countries.
Wow. So how did when you made that transition over, how did that kind of like get you? How did you transition then into more cybersecurity in the private sector?
Well, the type of intelligence work I did for the Department of Defense, they love their acronyms. It was an acronym called SIGINT, Signals Intelligence. We would gather, collect, and analyze various types of electronic transmissions. First couple of years, I worked what's between the Turkish border and the Chinese border in the northeast, that area called the Trans-Caucasus Military District. We're collecting information primarily focused on that time the USSR, collection, early stage analysis, package the information, send it back to NSA headquarters for deep analysis. So the move from that world to the cybersecurity world, fast forward 20 some years later, it wasn't a big leap. I mean, the technologies are all more or less the same. Sometimes in the cybersecurity world, we deal primarily with terrestrial transmissions, wires, fiber optic cable, that type of thing. On the DoD side, we primarily dealt with non-terrestrial electronic communications, signals intelligence, electronic intelligence, systems that we call non-air breathing systems, satellites in space, SR-71 program, the U-2 spy plane program, and other programs that don't make the headlines like those two seem to do all the time. So it was a pretty seamless transition.
That's great. Well, I know we've gotten to work with you, and it's been great. You're just the utmost professional, and you really, I mean, I learn a lot every time I feel like I talk to you. So one of the topics I know that's really on a lot of people's mind is cybersecurity insurance, and you have some experience with that. So I'd love to pick your brain because the cybersecurity insurance game has changed a lot in the last few years to what it is. Can you tell a little bit about what you've been doing with cybersecurity insurance to kind of set the baseline?
Sure. We have relationships with probably the top 5 insurance carriers in America and over in Europe. Zurich International over in Europe, and bigger carriers in America. We are in the information pipeline per se with their underwriting departments to take a look at how the traditional cybersecurity insurance policy and their data collection efforts to build that policy for the business is evolving. And a big push lately in the last year, 18 months, 2 years, has been the evolution of a separate data collection effort and policy body of work around ransomware prevention, ransomware defense. So We're seeing those currently as two different documents, and the complexity is exponentially evolving. As an example, uh, we were working with a big carrier, and we were taking a look at their ransomware data collection for underwriting documentation. 18 months ago, that was 2 pages, double spaced. Now it's 19 pages, double spaced. So I mean,
Wow.
they're putting a lot more detail into underwriting, and it clearly shows in the policy documentation that they're sending out to their customers after data collection and analysis has been performed. Uh,
What is real quick question for that? When you say data collection, what is the data that they're you're starting to see them collect in the analysis that they're doing?
the data looks a lot like what a business would probably see if they're a downstream technology provider to an upstream contract vehicle kind of thing. So everybody's probably familiar with that third party uh, risk collection documentation.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think that the insurance carriers started to use that as the foundation when it began, and now it's just evolving quickly as as a lot of as a great many companies have been affected by ransomware, data exploitation, data breaching, things like that, and the insurance companies are getting a lot more information to build a protection profile based on payouts and in the different areas that you'll see in your cybersecurity policy, things around PCI, DSS, fines and risks, reputational harm risks, and the various areas in reputational harm policy where there's mandatory payouts to help your business get build its reputation back.
yeah.
A lot of specific data collection and underwriting information around business disruption and what that actual cost to a business is, and where's the fiduciary responsibility to build up disaster recovery, business resumption planning proactively on behalf of the business, and what the underwriting and cost will be for businesses who the insurance carrier has deemed have not uh, fulfilled their fiduciary responsibility to build disaster recovery and business resumption planning proactively before looking at a policy. Breach response is another
Wow.
huge area. Yeah, breach
Uh-huh.
response is another big area for the carriers and underwriting, as is ransomware, everybody's favorite. What have you done to institutionalize proactively a ransomware defense or ransomware prevention program, or have you done nothing? You're just crossing your fingers and hoping that it doesn't come knocking on your door, kind of thing.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about the ransomware, but before I do, kind of a question about the insurance. So businesses, I think a lot of business owners are just getting kind of this information. They're used to just paying for an insurance, saying what they want for coverage and getting it. Now it sounds like that's changed because they have to live up to certain compliances, technology standards, and then prove it to the insurance carrier is what it's sounding like. Is that how you see it, Robert?
Uh, kind of. I mean, standard policy has about 15, 16 areas that the carrier is going to provide limits of coverage for. And that limit
Okay.
is going to be based
Yeah.
on limit's going to be based on an analysis of what you've done proactively and how
Okay.
that looks on a risk scale.
Okay.
As an example, let me take a look here. I have the the whole PCI fine thing. If like we were working on we were working on a risk analysis for a Northwest customer up here, a restaurant chain, and
Okay.
they outsource all of their PCI DSS risk to another company who does uh, cash transaction and order taking and customer data acquisition and prevent and excuse me, customer data
Yeah. No, that,
acquisition and
that
protect
makes it
and
okay.
protection. So there, we did some analysis on the risk of their public web presence, and this company who said they were PCI DSS compliant and was accepting all these cash transactions and brokering all this customer data. So we took a look at that and found out that the protections being offered by their PCI DSS transaction broker were pretty weak. And when the insurance company looked at them, they had a similar opinion. So the insurance company recommended that they would sell them $2 million in coverage. But last year in 2022, the average settlement cost for a PCI DSS break-in was $145 million on average. So I mean, that
So
means
2 million is like a drop in the bucket if there was a real breach.
right. So the insurance company is taking a look at what you've done and saying, okay, the risk of this happening is extremely high. Do we want to accept the risk and pay out 154 million, or do we want the business to do it, or do we want them to ask us why it's so low? You know, I don't have any view into the underwriting shop for that insurance company, but that was shockingly low amount of coverage being offered by the carrier.
Wow.
So I'm sure they have
they're outright getting really risk adverse in the cybersecurity worlds. And now, if you're thinking about the underwriting process, they must have some technical people now taking a look at that risk to make that judgment call, I would assume.
I would assume. I'm sure they have folks who they've either hired and trained or hired out of, the university system, or retiring CISOs who understand the technology, understand the risk, and can do that analysis and turn it into normal people understandable business speak. But the underwriting process is interesting. I mean, things that we think of every day as risks in a business sense, I don't think people have a good idea of how to quantify it. As an example, everybody talks about data breach and breach response. I mean, the average carrier recommended coverage is $2 million. However, in the last 12 months, the average payout was bordering on $10 million. So what does that mean? Does it mean the carrier wants you to pay out of pocket $8 million, or they want you to ask the questions so they can underwrite 10 million of risk? And what happens in the next 12 months? Is it going to go up to 12 million average payout or 20 million? Nobody knows. So it's like, where do you as the consumer, as the business, trying to manage your risk so an event doesn't wipe you out? Where do you find that happy medium between looking at the last 12 months of payouts and what's going to happen in the next 12 months? Is that going to escalate? Is it going to stay the same? What has it done? And the trends from the last 10 years are very poorly documented. So it's hard to build up that solid underwriting kind of platform of information year to year to year, going backwards.
So let's say a person's an IT director in an organization, and they're in charge of IT, and they're a lot of times getting asked. The decision makers are the ones that the owners are the ones putting in requests for insurance. So what do they need to know as an owner in an organization? What does like an IT person need to know to support that initiative and make sure that the organization is covered when it comes to this? And I know that's starts stemming into a broader conversation, but
right,
the game's changed a lot.
It has changed, and it is constantly evolving. I mean, it's like anything else. I think that the leadership in the IT organization, the leadership in the security organization, the leadership on the business side, it behooves you to be brutally honest about what you know and you don't know. And this is one of those things where I think you should definitely go outside of the organization and get some help, because it's a huge amount of money at risk. Just a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
It's just like, as an example, I was working with a big international freight management company, and a lot of their back end, matter of fact, all of their back end data systems ran on Oracle products, as well as their finance systems. Oracle came in and did a license audit and then presented the CIO with a bill for $14 million in license violations. So they gave us a call. We brought in the folks that we use for license management, audit, and negotiation. And over the course of 1 year, they negotiated that bill, that $14 million bill, down to $400,000. So, I mean, the company could have paid the 14 million, or they could have paid us what turned out to be $200,000 to do the negotiation on their behalf. So they netted $12.4 million that they kept by bringing in an outside professional. So I think the same thing is true from the cybersecurity insurance perspective. And yes, we charge for that service. So I'll have to be totally honest about that. If they don't want to bring in me or you or somebody like us, bring in somebody you trust and get at least a second opinion. There's a lot of risk and a lot of financial risk here.
Yeah, and I think the assumption is that the insurance is going to cover you, but then a lot of companies are starting to find out that insurance is not covering them, or just a small, like you said, a small fraction of the real cost, and it's like, it's really laying waste to a lot of organizations.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if I was the IT leadership team or the security leadership team at a company who had received a request by management to start negotiating cybersecurity insurance, I would certainly take a look at those questionnaires from the insurance broker and look at those as a risk-based project management work plan. What do I have in place now? What do I not have in place? If I were to prioritize those things, category 1 being high and 4 being low, how long and how much money would it cost me to implement these things? And then compare that to the policy cost, the risk avoidance in an insurance policy, and make a business decision. But
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about. I would love, so something when we were talking earlier, I would love to dig into, because it ties into insurance, because one is to have the policy in place, the other is to do all the things to really prevent a breach. So let's talk about ransomware prevention versus just ransomware, just not defense, right? Really stopping it. So this
sure.
is a big thing I know that you put a lot of energy into. I know a lot about.
Okay. Let me think. I should have planned ahead and had that ransomware prevention document open. Let me see if I can get that. Ransomware prevention, the way that we do it is made up of five key areas. One moment.
No, it's fine. Take your time. Because
Okay.
I know you put a lot of this into it. Could you also refer to is the document that you're referring to one that people could look up on their own on your website, or?
To be honest with you, we don't give that stuff away. Just,
Sure.
we have done a series on LinkedIn that they can look up called the
Okay.
Year of Anti-Ransomware. That was a multi-part
Cool.
exercise we went through. But yeah, give me 10 seconds to see if I can find this here.
Take your time. And this is one of the things that ransomware is still in the news, not quite as much as it was 2 years ago. But I've noticed that the ransomware attacks haven't gone down. So the news is just kind of getting maybe a little tired of reporting it, but it doesn't mean it's not constantly happening to organizations, and that the consequences to those organizations. In fact, a lot of the organizations that we're dealing with would never even.
Right. I think that it's just
small.
I mean, I think Gartner said it best when Gartner developed their hype cycle reporting kind of thing. Ransomware was in the hype cycle for a long time, and now there's a whole lot of other things that are the flavor of the week from the from the fear porn perspective. You know, what are making business people concerned? So
Right.
when we meet with customers and we talk about ransomware prevention, we have our methodology we call the Big Five. The number one thing related to ransomware prevention is try to prevent it in the first place. And the number one recommendation we recommend to them is that they adopt a mature DNS security product or products from a reputable vendor. There's a whole lot of people in that market space today. There's a few people who do it very, very well, and there's a lot of people who sell things, but their track record is limited. So it's hard to say. Is it mature? I mean, every time you type on your keyboard and pretty much hit the enter key, you're doing what's called a DNS lookup. So you want a tool that will take a look at outbound. If you're in your enterprise, or if you have remote employees, which we all have today, you want to take a look at that outbound connection request from a DNS security perspective and make a split-second decision. What's the risk of that outbound connection request? Do I want to block it? Do I want to drop it? Do I want to report on it? Where's the business value? Where's the risk mitigation value? The second thing your DNS security product should do for you is look at inbound connection requests to your remote employee's computer or to your enterprise firewall, and decide whether to drop that inbound connection. Is it a probe? Is it an attack? Is it a data collection effort? Is somebody scanning your DMZ? Why do you want that traffic to come through your firewall? Why don't you want to just drop it before it ever gets to your firewall and get some of that precious bandwidth you're paying for back?
Yeah.
A really good DNS security product should do those things for you, and it should also update itself on a fairly regular basis. I mean, the really, really good ones can be tuned to update themselves every 20 minutes. Others can be tuned to update every 12 to 24 hours. It depends on the maturity of the vendor's threat intelligence update cycle. And I get a lot of questions from customers, but I have a firewall, and the firewall vendor tells me that they bundle threat intelligence with it and at no cost. And the only thing I can say to them is, well, how much effort do they put into that if they charge nothing for it? You have to give that some thought. The things that you give away as a business, how much effort do you put into them? I mean, it's a loaded question, but it's an honest question. So I don't recommend. As an example, when my team was in charge of cybersecurity for San Diego County, California, we had remote sites, 400 remote sites, every flavor of firewall known to man. Every one of those firewall vendors updated their threat intelligence on those firewalls with a different cycle and different content. The risk that situation injected was astronomical. So we looked for a product that could work with any vendor's firewall and normalize the update cycle for the threat intelligence into that system to eliminate that ransomware risk, eliminate it. We didn't want to manage it anymore. It took too many labor dollars to manage it, to patch all that stuff, and to follow up and make sure the patches took, or the updates to their threat intelligence that took. It was just an absolute and complete nightmare. It was a labor dollar suck. Who wants to do that? When nowadays you can automate it. The next thing that we talk to folks about from a ransomware prevention perspective is password management, and especially for the remote team, your data center, and your cloud applications, and your cloud platform as a service, infrastructure as a service type of stuff. And the things that we recommend they focus on first and foremost are non-human accounts.
Okay.
When was the last time your Active Directory Kerberos encryption key was rolled over and updated? 99.999% of the people we talk to, it's never been done. So it's like,
right.
That's an enormous risk. And your service accounts, your non-human accounts on the Windows side, on the Linux side, your daemons, things like that. You need to have a plan to automate the changing of those passwords, hopefully based on risk. Once that's automated and you can wipe
Yeah,
it off your risk portfolio, then we start to look at human-based accounts. Also from a risk perspective,
that's
how often do you want to change those passwords, or what type of complexity thing?
that's a good
Uh,
point. We've seen in environments people have say they have a service account for like Veeam backups and
mhm,
domain admin. That password, runs the backups. They're running nightly, maybe even every half hour, something like that. Password
mhm.
never changes for years.
Right, and people don't. A lot of people don't look at CPU utilization during off hours. I mean, CPU utilization during off hours is a clear indicator that some automated thing is trying to crack passwords during the times that you're sleeping. The Windows sysvol container on everybody's laptop contains an enormous amount of passwords. And if you go to sleep at 9 o'clock at night and you get up at 8 in the morning, it's somebody has 11 hours that they can keep your CPU pegged, trying to crack the passwords in that sysvol container. It's a serious risk. So, I mean, you can either try to install things to check CPU utilization on every endpoint. Say you have 1,000 endpoints, that becomes a nightmare. Or you can just centrally change the password time to live. Say now it's eternal for your service accounts. Change it to every 8 hours. Change it to every 4 hours. Who cares? I mean, it's a complete and utter automation, and it's a fantastic way to eliminate business risk.
Man,
I mean,
that's a good.
the third thing we recommend to folks for ransomware prevention is backup architecture analysis. A lot of people, a great majority of people today, are backing up systems and applications and data to their cloud environment: AWS, Alibaba, Google, Microsoft. What does that backup architecture look like? Could you inadvertently be backing up uh, malware that's active and working in your backups, and inadvertently import it into your hopefully your critical backups, the ones you're going to restore from in the cloud? And what does that architecture look like? How do you take a critical system, like say Oracle financial data for you just finished quarter end, you close the books for the quarter, you close the books monthly for the last 3 months, and you want to back up that data and archive it. How do you do that? Do you just do it as a blob object and shove it into Veeam or something else that pumps it up to the cloud? Or do you stop and do some deep, deep, deep threat scanning in those blob objects, looking for risks before you send it up to the cloud? What does that architecture look like? So we make the recommendation that we put a lot of effort into what the value of that data, the value of those applications is, and take a hard look at that backup architecture and make recommendations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. No, thanks for sharing that. That's really huge. Now, you guys are also doing a lot. Something you mentioned earlier is kind of the web service security for
Mhm,
PI and DFS risk.
mhm.
Talk.
Uh,
What are companies missing there, and what do they need to do to protect their organizations?
uh, it's kind of a twofold question. Number one, what does your DMZ architecture look like? I mean, do you have web services in one collision domain in the DMZ, business logic in another, and data in another, or do you have all three of those components in the same IP collision domain in the DMZ? So they share risk, completely share risk. That's
Right.
a big piece of it. I mean, we'll take a look at the DMZ architecture. We'll scan it, find out what's up there, and then we'll take a look at your web services security and APIs that are public facing. Because they're right now like cream and coffee. Once you stir the cream in the coffee, you can't get it out. And web services security and API security are pretty much the same thing nowadays. An API request is a direct request to a data structure. if your team or your security provider hasn't mentioned the OWASP API top 10 security best practices to you, I'd strongly recommend you get a second opinion. I mean, at the County of San Diego, we couldn't wait for OWASP top 10, so we came up with our county top 11. And then when OWASP top 10 came out, surprise, surprise, they mirrored ours perfectly. We'd already started to put that stuff in place. Make sure that no connections are allowed unless they're authenticated. And throttling on the connection. If the connection comes in and it's authenticated correctly, and then says, give me all data in all databases, holy cow, that's crazy. Don't do that. OWASP, and we recommend you got to throttle those connection requests. Don't give them 10 million records. Give them 100 at a time or 1,000 at a time, depending on how well you know that person. From the web services security perspective, it's always a compromise between business agility and cybersecurity. I mean, if you look at the folks if you use any of the top 10 web services security scanners out there, and take a look at the big boys like Microsoft.com or TransAmericaFinancialServices.com, and scan them, you'll see that on the as an example, the observatory.mozilla.org web services security scanner, which is very well thought of. I mean, Microsoft, Transamerica, some of these other big companies, they get a B-, maybe a C+, because they really have to make a risk judgment between the agility of the site to provide value to the customer, and absolutely strict cybersecurity. So it's like anything else. What you know or what you don't know is the big problem. If you're not scanning your company's web services infrastructure at least once a month, or at least after every patch, or at least after every content upgrade, then you're opening yourself up for some pretty big problems. And since the scanning is free, and they'll even do the analysis for you for free, the analysis is really quite good. It's hard to beat.
Yeah, that's a great tip. That's a great tip for an organization to be able to leverage that.
And I'm sure your organization or mine would love to help them with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So no, that's huge. Now, in the industry, you're also, one last question I wanted to, pose to you is, like, how can people get in contact you if they have questions, and a little bit about, some follow-up content that they might be interested, or just having a discussion with you?
Sure. Our public website is www.thesecretciso.com, all one word. There's a lot of content up there that we give away for free for small and mid-sized businesses, so anybody's free to take a look there, and you can get in touch with us through that, or you can reach me directly on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is Leader with Vision, Robert Thomas. That's Leader with Vision, all one word, or through Ephraim.
That's right. Yeah, we love working together on the joint engagements, and so it's been great. Thanks for coming on, Robert, and thanks for joining on the Breach Report.
Thank you very much. Very gracious with your time. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Talk soon. Bye.